2026 onwards, what we have seen, that's when the year of economic reality has come into the picture. So AI bills shocks are now coming. Your organization chart wasn't actually designed to make decisions. It was designed to move information from one layer to the other. So, and these layers exist because information was expensive to transport from lower levels to upper layers. And AI makes that essentially free. Data is what is known in an organization. A context is what the agent needs to know. And the memory is what the system learns over time. Imagine this as a Formula One, car, where you have the motor as the engine and the harness as the car. So a Ferrari engine inside a poorly designed car loses races all the time. Teams are measuring, prompts, tokens, conversations, and tasks, whereas the executives are measuring revenue, retention, margin, risks, growth, right? So there apparently seems to be no relationship between these two. You may be doing 80% of your work, which is the iceberg model which MIT came up with, which may be under the belt, which basically would be, working with different, interfacing with different people, coming to know about different opportunities here and there. AI is not going to do that. Now those developers are becoming architects. Your analysts are becoming supervisors. Your SMEs are now looking at themselves as knowledge curators. Your product management guys, they are now becoming capability managers. So it's not just a change in the title, it's the way that they are functioning.
Hello and welcome to the Enterprise Tech Talk podcast. I'm your host, Saumitra Kalikar. Now, over the past few years, organizations have invested and experimented with various forms of AI. But now there is a decisive shift towards agentic systems that can learn, that can reason, act, and coordinate work increasingly autonomously. The real challenge now that is emerging for enterprise leaders is how to industrialize this new form of AI. That is, how to effectively engineer and architect it, how to govern it, how to derive value from it, and most importantly, how to prepare their workforce for this next phase. To unpack these important questions, I'm joined today by Amit Mudgal. Amit has deep experience in agentic systems. He's also founder and CEO of Clearways AI. Amit, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Saumitra. Pleasure to be here.
Amit, let's get started with your professional journey. Tell us a little bit about how you got into the world of agentic systems and what led to the foundation of Clearways AI.
For me, it's a very old journey. I entered through creating decision systems, the fuzzy matching, the data cleansing part of it. Back in the day, the Bayesian risk scoring that we used to do, and the weighted scoring systems, the ensemble classifiers and holistic evaluations and so on and so forth. There were also rules engine, which we had developed, and the collaborated filtering and retail. So for me, it was quite an old journey. And, right now, I think when people say that AI is started by GPT systems, I kind of smile a little. We were actually injecting intelligence into apps before it was fashionable. I see AI in three waves. The first wave was a symbolic and the rules-based AI, which was basically the ELIZA systems of 1960s and later the expert systems. But the second waves is when I actually came into the picture with the statistical machine learning, scoring, classification, recommendation engines, the fraud detection engines, and predictive analytics. This was a wave I was directly part of, and now the third wave of AI, which is the transformer-based and agentic AI. That's this is where it's the most exciting part of AI, where we can see the reason against we can see these agents reason against the goals, retrieve context, call tools, and so on and so forth. So I've always worked in highly regulated spaces like insurance and financial institutions, and also healthcare. But there's a lot of scope for challenges. That's why I kind of founded the Clearways AI for enterprises to move beyond the demos and make sure that they're going through a production implementation smoothly.
Yeah, as you rightly said, many of us who have been in the industry for last 20 years or so, they have seen at least those last two phases. Recommendation with, and Netflix was the poster boy for that phase. And now the transformation based agentic AI and Gen AI phase. But when you talk to your enterprise customers, right, about the AI maturity they have, what across the AI maturity curve in general, where do you see most of the enterprises are today?
See, AI is going through the psychological journey right now, which internet went through in the late 90s. So at that time, you were making websites to show your presence, your AI created demos, etc. Are the same. So all demos are magical to look at the first time. This is like showing a Victorian person the microwave to cook. But 2026 onwards, what we have seen, that's when the year of economic reality has come into the picture. So AI bills shocks are now coming, and it was put into place to fuel adoption initially with the token, kind of tokens given out. However, now people are consuming less tokens than badly designed agents. So, token audits are taking over. Maturity wise, the real value is hiding in deeply boring things, like, for example, your claims intake, your invoice reconciliation, your compliance workflows, and so on and so forth. Now, AI's first superpower may be simply by removing, organizational plaque which is existing there. But here's something which nobody's saying. Your organization chart wasn't actually designed to make decisions. It was designed to move information from one layer to the other. So, and these layers exist because information was expensive to transport from lower levels to upper layers, and AI makes that essentially free. So, which makes the org chart itself a bottleneck. Now, I've seen organization in various stages of maturity. It's now left in the boardroom. It has now left the boardroom, and it's penetrating into workspaces, where it is, if it is implemented badly, it's like as a feature, it's showing marginal and no benefits. But in case it's embedded into the DNA of the company, then these boring processes, and in all these boring processes, it actually shows real revenue.
That's right. Now, I do want to unpack with you the implications of operating model, and there are going to be potentially significant operating model implications in the future as adoption of agentic AI matures more and more. But I also want to understand where you see enterprises focusing in terms of use cases and benefits at this stage. Is it more of a back office kind of use cases that they are safely playing around, or now they have started to also start rolling out the agentic use cases more for customer experience and new revenue generation opportunities?
So I think we can differentiate that between exploitation and exploration parts. We have seen that the start is actually from the boring spaces, like claims processing, like doing boring work, like what you may call, just getting in all the data, cleaning the data, etc. That's all exploitation work. This was quite redundant work. Now, we can actually.
Productivity and efficiency
Correct.
focus.
Correct,
Okay.
correct. That's where we should start from. And that takes away, in a job function, that takes away like 80% of some people's job, and it's only 20% where they are really thinking about doing something more productive and more kind of innovative. That's the places where we would like to explore more, and that's where agentic framework, not agentic, but at least the Gen AI work initially, and then it is being taken over in an exploitation phase by the agentic framework.
Yeah, yeah. And how do you see most of the organizations doing experiments versus actually starting to do the productionization of use cases? Because you and I know there have been technology waves in the past, and we know that experimentation, piloting something does not necessarily equate to deriving value in the production, right?
Right.
And then there have been some reports, even from Gartner and few analysts, that most of the organizations have impressive experimentation level use cases and pilots, but they do keep struggling to cross the boundaries and productionize those, right? So where you are seeing organizations on that phase, and important want to get your perspective as to why organizations struggle there. Um, what is it that they miss in terms of productionizing the use cases?
Right. So in productionization, what I'm seeing towards is, like when we implement a pilot, it just proves that AI is possible in an organization. But if you go for actual implementation, the enterprise deployment, that shows that the deployment is actually AI is reliable, it's governable, and it's economically valuable. Now, everything looks great in pilot. The data is clean, the workflow is controlled, and honestly, nobody from compliance has joined the meeting yet. But production is really where it shows up. Now, the systems has to deal with messy enterprise data in production. There are conflicting systems, there are permissions, latency, audit requirements. There are edge cases which come up in production, and there's actually business accountability involved in all of this. And with agentic AI, this becomes even more important because the system is no longer just generating content, it's taking actions on your behalf inside workflows. So, pilots can be impressive, but enterprise deployment actually prove whether it's a survivable thing in production or not. So, that's how I see it, at least a difference between the pilots and the enterprise scale deployments today.
No, that's true. And as I said, there's a lot of experimentation going on. And for last 2 years, I think most of the organizations failed just to get comfortable with these new forms of AI. But now they are being asked, they are being audited for the the benefits, and we'll unpack that as well. But let's move towards a little bit of technical aspects of agentic systems. I want to unpack, at least at a high level, what does it mean from the engineering perspective of agentic systems and how to architect those, right? When we talk about agentic systems, properly productionizing agentic systems, I'm talking about, there are a few things coming to mind, right? There are a few capabilities you need to have in place, right? There is, of course, focus on the traditional capabilities like having good data backbone, data governance, strong security posture, etc. But I want to unpack what it means specifically for in the agentic context. But then there are few new capabilities that are also very much specifically relevant to agentic, particularly multi-agent systems. When we talk about the context management, the memory management, state management aspect, right? So would you mind unpacking that or paint a picture at a high level as to what kind of capabilities organizations should think of to have a more effective, successful multi-agent deployment?
Right. So, you know, if you're talking about multi-agent, implementations, there are certain foundations which you have to take into consideration. So that's something which goes without saying. Let's actually unpack that to uh, you know you have to have, in an agent, you have to have a strong memory strategy. If you go with that, you have to have a knowledge memory, an episodic memory, a procedural memory, which is basically a, which is the first aspect of it. What agents are, basically, agents are nothing but, if you see, these are orchestrators which do work for, they are specialists in systems, and they do specialized work for an organization. And the way that they are arranged is based on what kind of architecture you are following today, right? You could follow an agent which can be a hierarchical agent. You can have an orchestration agent, you can have level agents, and so on and so forth. But they are masters of basically managing the context, the memory, and creating an outcome for an agent orchestration workflow. That's what they actually do. Now, choosing there are various dominant architecture patterns for agents. You can have a react pattern, which is a reasoning and act pattern, which is basically you observe something, you think, and the tool does it. Like you can search the web, you can analyze the results, summarize it. It's fast, cheap, simple. The other types of agents are like a planner agent, which is slightly more sophisticated, where you can execute, you have a goal, you can plan a task, you can execute the task, and you can get a result. That's it just reduces hallucinations. That's one of the kind of mature agents. Then you have a generator to critic agent, where basically you generate a content and you critique it, and the revision is also critiqued by the agent itself. You have a coordinator agent, which is in a hub and spoke model, which most of your viewers might be familiar with, which basically, you have research agents, you have coding agents, and finance agents, which coordinates these, which are coordinated by these coordinator agents. And then you have a hierarchical model. It's like a company agent, where you can think of as a CEO agent, which gives work to a director and a manager and a worker. So there are various forms of agents and how they are architecturally arranged, and what they do. But their goal is simple, to basically get some redundant work done, and also get in a context.
And what differentiates agents from other engineering and architecture patterns in the past, like microservices, etc., is they rely heavily on context, right? How important are those contexts, Amit, for agents? And how organizations should be thinking of surfacing that context for agents?
So, I think there are three patterns. One is like the data in an organization, context, and what the memory is. So the data is what is known in an organization. A context is what the agent needs to know, and the memory is what the system learns over time. So if you think like a human consultant, the data is everything in a filing cabinet which exists, all the data manuals, all your company tax records, etc. The context is the document which is spread across your table for today's meeting, right? And the memory is the experience you have accumulated over the years of prior engagements. Now, the consultant needs all three of them. Agents are no different if you want to achieve a particular goal. So just like humans, if we have the right context, we can search the data for in the filing cabinet and get our experiences, add our experiences to it, and gather more experience doing it. So this was an interesting use case I saw as part of storing data in memory relationships that can be stored in graph systems also, where you have relationships stored. For example, you have, if you are trying to get tax records, those tax records are in my tax file, so that relationship is there. You can go to this particular database to get it. So these kinds of things, kind of interplay with each other, and the organization needs to manage that very well.
And one question I have on this is just to unpack this a little bit further. Look, humans like you and I, we typically know what information resides in which locations in it across the enterprise, right? And typically, what is the source of truth for what type of information, right? We know the policies are the source of truth for certain information, and CRMs are the source of truth for another for information, etc. Now, agents, when you actually start rolling out agentic systems, which are completely autonomous, they may not understand or may not know that what is the source of truth for what kind of information, right? And if you are surfacing and exposing that kind of agentic system to customer interaction, you want to make sure that they are serving the right advice, and they're using the right sources of truth to deliver that advice. So, how this particular problem should be addressed in your view?
Right. There are various, precision at K, etc. These are some of the metrics which we use in the industry to make sure that whatever information is getting pulled is is correct. Now we also have various guardrails to make sure that the execution of the agent is governed and it's safe. Like scope guardrails are there. Like every agent should have a clearly defined operating boundary. Your permission guardrails are there. They should be operating on the privilege, on the least privilege principle. There are action guardrails as well, which is, in case you're thinking it's a low risk thing, like for example, suggesting an email, action which is basically high risk, which is sending out an email. Now we have to have these policy and human escalation guardrails and so on and so forth to make sure that the data which is coming inside the agents and is basically a correct data which is coming in. There's I'm sorry, the data which comes in to these systems is actually checked through the human through the precision at K, recall at K, and other methodologies that we have developed over time.
One thing I quickly wanted to unpack with you is a specific question I have in mind, because that is surfacing in the conversations lately in the AI industry. When you think of maintaining the context or for agents, right, or having the reference guardrails for agents, the de facto format that has emerged for in the agentic AI industry is the markup format, right? And you see whether it's you use Claude, whether you use any other vendor technology, there is the standard context files which are which are there, like agent.md or memory.md and few other things, right? Of late there was a paper or whether it was a paper or post, I don't remember exactly, from one of the employees from Anthropic, who argued that we probably have gone too far and we should explore alternate options like HTML, which is much more human friendly. Right? Because this is a hot topic right now, I wanted to get your thoughts on this as to uh, which pattern is one pattern really better than another, or and which pattern potentially will be adopted more and more in the future.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that HTML versus Markdown. We it's not a competition there, but we have to use where things are apt. Like for example, I'll give you something which we recently implemented. A broker wants to implement recommendation for a $50 million manufacturing client, right? So the orchestration engine needs to coordinate between your client intelligence agent, your benchmarking agent, carrier agents, and so on, so forth. Here, if you're using a graph way of a graph database to actually send context, so there your enterprise memory comes into the picture. For example, the ABC manufacturing which we were talking about, it owns property policy placed with travelers insurance, right? So that relationship, when you're transferring context to an agent, that is most important. Your YAML file storage also we did there. The orchestration workflow, we were saying that, okay, there's some things which you can do sequentially. Some things like, for example, step one is client intelligence, step two is benchmarks, etc. Run certain elements in benchmarks like carrier scans, etc. You can do in parallel branches. So that is specified very well in YAML files. The XML, HTML, the agent to agent task handoff, it is actually pretty good at that. So because it has got a task tag, it has got an agent tag under it, and you have a client tag, so you do not the agent does not lose context there. It knows which industry you're talking about, which deliverable tag you're talking about, so it doesn't get confused as you're moving from as you're traversing through the XML. um, we also use JSON for runtime data exchanges. Like, for example, if you have the benchmark which comes in, these benchmarks were returning premium percentiles and loss ratio, etc., and the renewal risks, etc. So that was coming in JSON. The Markdown was especially important when you have to have human readable knowledge, like an executive summary, etc. What I've seen is, in case you're debugging, it actually makes sense to put stuff in Markdown files. Otherwise, or it's summarizing in the final output of the agent. Otherwise, the most effective way of agent to agent task handoff is HTML or XML. For YAML, orchestration workflows. For graph, if you have enterprise memory, you can store there. JSON is for any runtime data exchange, and your Markdown definitely is for human readable inputs.
One additional question I have is, and this is again one of the topics which is emerging in the AI industry, as I see, is about harness engineering, and the overall emerging acknowledgement now is that AI models are great, but they are slowly becoming commoditized in the sense that, yes, most of the vendors, at least OpenAI, Anthropic, and others, they have similar kind of models and which you can choose from. But the real differentiation value is now how you create the harness around those models, right? And so harness engineering is becoming more important than just choosing a particular AI model. What's your view on what are the important considerations leaders should think of when building that proper harness around AI models?
So, Saumitra, what I would say is, like, imagine this, this as a Formula One, car, where you have the model as the engine and the harness as the car. So, a Ferrari engine inside a poorly designed car loses races all the time. A slightly weaker engine inside a well-engineered car often wins. There's a good chance that it'll win. Now, take coding agents as an example. People think that agent is, you have a user, there's an LLM, there's a code which it generates, right? Um, it's more like, you have a user, it has a task router, it has a planner, it has a code agent. I think then there's a review agent, there's test agents, security agents, and so on and so forth. But so there's a lot of and a memory layer, and observability layer, etc. These are all harnesses. Now, a domain harness in our case, which, if you go to insurance industry, is basically, your renewal workflows, your DNO placement processes, your claims triaging, etc. Right? Now, if you have these things defined already, like what your domain harnesses are, then you can choose any model. The model becomes interchangeable. Right now, you can use ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, DeepSeek without changing the business outcome, because your harnesses are so strong at the moment. Your data and your procedural knowledge to come to a you know come to an outcome is determined by the harness and what context you feed into it. Almost all you know there had been an initial kind of a difference in how ChatGPT used to respond versus Claude used to respond versus Gemini, but they have learned from each other, in a way where they're inference testing each other and gathering the knowledge from each other. So now I think the difference between uh, what individual models can do is kind of very small right now, unless you're using a frontier model. Now, a frontier model is a completely different story, but with all these local models available, I think the it's level plane. The plane has been leveled.
Yeah. So I wanted to move our discussion towards another important aspect, which is another hot topic that is emerging across the enterprises, and this is about demonstrating the value of the investment, the ROI, and the economics about AI. Right. One thing that is becoming very important for CFOs and senior leaders in general is how to manage and predict and control, I would say, the overall spend around AI, and demonstrate what are the different ways they should be measuring the value, right? So let's split into two parts. Let's first talk about what kind of different ROI models emerging for to measure the value. Then I want to get your attention on the bill shocks that some enterprises are seeing, and we have seen so many news in recent times on there. I wanted to get your thoughts. Because you must be talking to your enterprise customers, how clear AI positions and advises customers on how they should be measuring value in their investments on AI.
Correct, correct. I think one thing which we cannot ignore is the fact that teams are measuring, prompts, tokens, conversations, and tasks, whereas the executives are measuring revenue, retention, margin, risk, growth, right? So there apparently seems to be no relationship between these two. So
Right.
what, say for example, if you have an agent function which generates a renewal strategy, etc., we always see the impact of it. Like, what is the impact of having this renewal strategy done, which is basically renewing your policies at the end of the year? And for bigger companies, there are bigger, kind of risks, etc., which they have to cover, better rates that they can get from the carriers, etc. So earlier, used to go with this manual process. It used to take like 120 days, 90 days, etc., 60 days, and so on and so forth. They used to start these processes. Now they can actually do it pretty quickly. So the earlier renewal preparation, more market options are there, better broker recommendations are being provided. There are new business wins because of all of this, and there is a revenue growth because of all of this. Now, see how it grows in form of a tree. So your basic prompts and token and conversation and tasks which are getting automated are actually leading up to a revenue growth, for example, if that is the metric you're chasing, right? Or it could be a expansion in your customer base, etc. So we help our customers actually create these KPI trees like this, which actually go from the lowest form of how the agents are using these tokens to a fact that where it is impacting your KPIs and metrics, etc. I think this was the first part of your question. The second part was that everybody gets AI bill shocks these days. Now, traditionally, I think last year they had started doing this, that they've started associated tokens with the usage that was there. In a way, it was okay to start with because we were trying to get adoption moving. But soon they realized that there's no outcome out of this. There is no business outcome which is happening. Now, the traditional software scale, which we learned the hard way, was basically you have X number of users, You have X number of transactions, you multiply it, that's the scale that you get. But AI cost scale is completely different. You have users, you have requests, you have contexts, then you have agents, and you have iterations as well. So one user can spawn hundreds of agents, which can, kind of go in a tizzy and go in some infinite loops, etc., till the time they get a response which is acceptable by the orchestrator. Now, the sources of waste in this are immense. Like, you can have a context bloat. This is what we have seen in our implementations of our clients, where we have to, kind of advise them, is that there are context bloats. 90% of the tokens are context bloats, which nobody is using also, and they're transferring from one agent to the other. There are recursive agent loops, which they go through, and some of the agents are actually resolving problems which are known. They've already resolved that problem, and yet they're resolving it again, because they were part of a new context that was never handed off, right? Like premium models, we did this also, where we were all this context was going to a premium model like a chat GPT, which was costing them tokens. But nobody was telling them that, hey, why are you using a premium model? Why can't you use you can use a local model for it, like a Mistral, which is Olama model, which is sitting on your desktop or a container running somewhere. It'll be less expensive for you to run that local model rather than sending it to ChatGPT or Claude, etc. So we had advised our customers that instead of measuring, kind of these token costs, etc., and AI costs, you should actually determine what is your cost for per outcome, and allocate budgets per agent. So that way they were able to rationalize it better and also see how it is impacting their KPI much better.
Um, One thing I wanted to get your view was quickly around the governance and risk aspect around agentic AI deployments. And you briefly mentioned this, but in traditional governance, when we talk about in the enterprise context, is all about um, lengthy processes and forums, and where the risks are discussed and decisions are made, etc., which most of the time is typically reactive in nature, right? But agents in the agentic world, that may be a bit too late, right? Because they are working continuously and autonomously, etc. So you want to make a governance as real time as possible, right?
Right.
So what's the shift is required to how do you see the governance being embedded in the flow of work itself, so that the agents follow the right guardrails, policies, whether it's in the coding agents, whether it's operational agents, any scenario.
Right. I think what we have seen so far, the in autonomous agents especially, I've seen this evolve in 4 stages. First, you have your human approval stage, where you have your agent. It has given some recommendation. There's some human input, and that leads to action, right? So, agent, it gives some recommendation. The human checks it, and then the action proceeds back, right? That is, you're completely involving human in the loop before any action gets taken. Um, well, it is a rudimentary form of when you are entering into agentic AI. The second stage, when you're slightly mature, you would go to human oversight. An agent will take an action. It will complete that action because it is within your risk parameters, and then a human is going to review that, right? The third is policy constrained autonomy, where you have a policy, an agent acts on that policy and takes any action. At the end of the day, you will see that is the policy being followed or not. You're not worried about the action, you're worried about the policy more. And then comes the next evolution of this stage, is fully autonomous domains. That's where I think your autonomous agents, it's a holy grail for that. So there, these are well bounded environments. Humans just govern the systems, and they do not take into account the agent decisions. They don't even look at that. Might be doing some audits here and there, but they actually look at the ROI. They look at what the business outcome is, etc., and they work along with that, with that input, and basically say that, yeah, it's working because there's a level of abstraction that I have brought myself on, where I'm just going to observe the system rather than individual decisions.
And the other aspect I wanted to get your thoughts on is around the impacts on people, the workforce, both positive and negative, but mostly the negative kind of perception that is built around AI, particularly in enterprises. Um, and we have seen many cases where there have been reductions in the workforce. Uh, but at the same time, many of those organizations are also invested heavily on AI-related capabilities. So it looks like there is a kind of a reallocation, restructure of how the funds are allocated and spent across the business, right? Um, but primarily, what's your thoughts? What are your thoughts on the overall perception that is built that AI would most probably take over jobs in the enterprise context? And what kind of advice you provide to your customers on that?
Right. I think more than customers, it's the employees who are getting impacted. But
Yeah.
I always give them a John Henry, example. John Henry was one of the railroad workers. I think when steam, when steam engines came, or etc., steam drills, etc., had come,
Mm.
he had gone with competing with the machine, and he unfortunately he lost his life in that. But the fact is, because he got tired and exhausted. But the fact is, do not compete with AI, right? It is there to automate your work. Even after John Henry's era, the fact that railroad workers were now the managers of the steam press machine, rather than the steam drilling machine, rather than drilling it, the holes themselves. So your work would considerably change as you go along. You may be doing 80% of your work, which is the iceberg model which MIT came up with, um, which may be under the belt, which basically would be, you know, working with different, interfacing with different people, coming to know about different opportunities here and there. AI is not going to do that. They might find, if they have exposure to other models, that's very mature model. But most of the work which they do is like, let me get these claims, let me process these claims and move forward. That takes away 80% of your work. Your employers are after that, not
Mm.
that they would like to reduce your job completely. So so that you can focus more on that 20%, which is now the exploratory work, the new work, which which will actually improve the ROI of sorry, your top line and bottom line top line metrics. That's where the push is right now. They are trying to create margins by reducing the bottom line, by giving all the redundant work to AI, and so that you can focus on the top line of finding new opportunities, new ways of interacting with AI, where you can find new patterns, you can find new things to do. So that is something which we are constantly telling people, that do not think that AI is taking your job. It is making your job easier.
Yeah. And let's not also forget the backlog. Typically, most of the organizations have on the work to be done, and that backlog keeps piling up because people just don't have capacity to focus on that. And with agentic AI gives opportunity to for people to for organizations to then accelerate that backlog and get more features and more features on the market.
Exactly.
Um,
Fail fast, and that's the strategy these days. That experiment and fail fast.
yeah, absolutely. Addition to that is quickly a question around the operating model, how it should evolve or potentially would evolve. Um, as agents become more common in the enterprises, and you see that there are agents and agentic systems being built which are more focused on particular area of the business, right? Whether it's a back office claims, you mentioned, right, or
Right.
anything else. Um, how do you see that people agent interaction relationship and role responsibilities will evolve? Do you see different people role will emerge or are already emerging? And would they have different set of responsibilities now?
Right, right. So what we've seen is that there are a lot of changes which are happening in the roles which are there. Your initially people were like there's a huge force of getting into coding, learning coding languages. Now those developers are becoming architects. Your analysts are becoming supervisors. Your SMEs are now looking at themselves as knowledge curators. Your product management guys, they are now becoming capability managers. So it's not just a change in the title, it's the way that they are functioning, because now we are at a different level of abstraction, right? Previously, when handlooms were there used to be people who were actually doing all the handloom work. Now nobody looks at that, because now there are machine managers who would be just adept at seeing that the input is coming in, the cotton is coming in, and the fabric is going out. They're checking quality, etc. So, uh, so the level of abstraction has moved one layer up, and the leaders are now measuring, like for example, number of reports, from number of reports being produced to now they're measuring the quality of decisions influenced. So this is a leadership mindset shift which is happening. um, and even people who are leaders now, they should stop measuring things in an older way. They should start with the AI world. They have to start kind of measuring stuff in a new way. The biggest mistake leaders will make is viewing agents as digital employees. They should be viewed as force multipliers rather than just digital employees.
Look, as we start wrapping up now, I wanted to get your thoughts on how the future is evolving. And in the agentic world, the future could be another 6 months, could be entirely new future, and another 12 months could be entirely new future. But where do you see how the industrialization of agentic systems happening across the industries, verticals? Which verticals do you see are taking step progressing ahead rapidly versus which verticals are you see potentially are more cautious on the journey, I would say, and could be reflection of they being more regulated industries as well. Um, that's one thing I want to definitely get your insights on. And the other question is, if some into business is just embarking on this journey, right? What kind of advice you will offer to the CIOs and senior leaders as to how they should approach transitioning from traditional AI now to agentic AI, and typically also transitioning from experimentation to production?
Right, right. So, so first of all, where exactly is the future of AI? Um, you know, AI is going to be more dominant in your work. And this is because of the fact that if you're doing redundant work over a period of time, you would lose the capability of thinking outside the box. People who are going to think outside the box are going to be rewarded. People who are doing stuff which nobody has done or thought of before, they are going to be risk takers. And again, taking risks is something that you have greater risks versus with greater rewards. So I think your incentivizing those people has to change as we go along, right? And how is your management going to look at it? It's going to be start with the work, not the technology. You have to create your champions early to the senior leadership. That's what my recommendation would be. Don't just show, implement it also. Don't do show and tells, do implementations as well. Focus on quick wins just to make sure that you're implementing something which is easy to do. You have to focus on that. And you have to redesign your incentives, like reward for business outcomes, invest in role evolution, where your roles are now going to evolve. Your developers are going to be architects, etc. So their metrics of measurement is going to change. Not lines of code are developed. They should be now rewarded on what kind of stable system, how many issues came in that system. That's what they should be rewarded on, right? You should train for judgment and not just for prompting. So your judgment should be like, okay, well, I think the system is going to work, rather than, this prompt is, it worked or not worked, etc. And you have to make your adoption visible. So if people can see that, something has worked in AI, they have to incrementally build on top of that. Now, how are the leaders going to stay ahead? Again, you have to map work, not jobs. You can't think that, I have got, 5 people doing 5 pieces of job, so I can just eliminate 1 or 2. You have to map work. If 5 people are doing pieces of work which are redundant, you can collapse that. That will affect the job. But you have to see what these guys are doing. You just cannot be at the surface level saying that, this guy is just doing something, without looking at what he does, what innovation he brings along. Otherwise, you will lose some good employees. You have to identify your institutional knowledge, because that's where it actually sits with the user, with your workers. You have to build an AI native operating layer. Operating layer has to be AI native, rather than, okay, well, I'll add it as a feature. That shouldn't be the case. It should be embedded in your DNA. And also, one of the other things which I advise my customers is develop an AI FinOps discipline early in the game. How many tokens are you using? What is the, how many agents, how many tokens is consumed by each agent, etc. That needs to be clearly called out, right? You have to, again, I'll reiterate that, because you have to redesign your leadership metrics, and also develop agent supervisors. You just cannot let the agent run amok right now in the initial stages. You have to see the outcome. You have to see how it's working, and experiment aggressively. Scale selectively, but experiment aggressively. Not everything which works in your demo environment and your sandbox will actually be scalable. And you have to be very cautious about how you're scaling stuff. Just focus on your decision advantage and be prepared for a hybrid workspace, because when you're preparing for a hybrid workspace, you are kind of contending with the fact that there's going to be some level of digital workers who are going to work with you, versus there are going to be some actual people who would be working with you. So make sure that you have that clarity and that accommodation, that this is a digital workspace, and a digital worker would be able to respond much faster, or even on Sundays, etc. But don't have the same expectation from some of the people who are, in the non-digital space.
On that note, thanks for joining Enterprise Tech Talk, and thanks for your time. I think it was a really good discussion. We covered so many topics.
Thank you, Saumitra. Pleasure being on the call.
If you found this discussion valuable, please follow and subscribe to Enterprise Tech Talk. And thanks for listening. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.